Hey everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. I'm Petter, and today I'm continuing the conversation on the big reveal of the Doomsday cast last Wednesday. I've done a video on everybody who's in there and kind of how I think the plot might go based off of this first round of casting. But they've come out and said, Robert Downey Jr., I think it was on Instagram, said was like, "Oh, that's a lot of people," and Marvel Studios responded, "Well, there's room for more. There's going to be more coming." We expected that, just based off the list of who was there. So I put together my top 10 who I kind of expect to see in Avengers Doomsday. A lot of these are pretty standard. I would say the bottom three are probably the most out there. But let's talk about who they could potentially be and why I think it makes sense. First off, I'm going to do two of them at once here. So my number 1 and 2 are Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange and Charlize Theron as Clea. Why? Because they were introduced Clea was introduced directly with the idea of incursions. Even if they're not major players in this film, I do expect them to be in there. Now, are we going to get them announced is an interesting question, because they could be spending most of their time in the Dark Dimension, which means that they could be filming at the volume for that, since it's not an actual physical location that you can really create a set for. If they are filming in the volume, Marvel may try and hide that. But that's just kind of the first two, who I think, as I said, they make a lot of sense. Where we left them, it would feel weird that they're not in there. The only way, in my opinion, that they're not going to be in there is if they really want to do Doctor Strange 3 in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, and they then decide we'll just have it take place during the same time as Doomsday. That could make sense. Next up, we have a Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye, and let's do Danai Gurira as Okoye, and Mark Ruffalo as Hulk. So two of kind of the OG Avengers, and then one of the main Wakandans directly connected with Letitia Wright Shuri. So all of them make a lot of sense, even if they're not major roles. Again, my idea for this is that we're going to have kind of this Avengers versus X-Men over here, and I think it's very possible that with these actors, they're not going to be part of that active battle, which may be why they haven't announced them yet, or why their contracts maybe are still in process, because I think there are probably a number of different actors you could ask to do some of these roles. So that got us halfway through the list, and right now I think it makes a ton of sense. Everybody's well connected into the plot that we have thus far. And then the next two are going to be connected on the X-Men side of things. So we got so many of the Fox X-Men, but we were missing 3 names, notably 4 names, I guess. Hugh Jackman, Wolverine, was missing. I didn't put him on the list. I think he's, in the MCU, tied to Deadpool in a lot of ways, so I think they're going to keep that separate, maybe bring that in Secret Wars. I also skipped Anna Paquin as Rogue. I just don't know that they're going to bring back that character. Could be interesting to do, but I think they know that with Rogue and Gambit, those are going to be a couple of the big pieces moving forward. And then we got, so many of the rest of the cast, but like I said, there were few notable missing names. Famke Janssen is one of them as Jean Grey. I think it's very likely we get her back just because you kind of need some of those X-Men heroes back again. And the other one being Halle Berry as Storm. I can't imagine that they would do this without Storm. And I mean, last year there were rumors that Halle Berry was going to be in Deadpool and Wolverine because of how she had done her hair. So I wonder if Marvel had started talking with her already at that point about potentially returning for Doomsday. And now it's just nailing down what that contract looks like, what the role for that character is. Because I think for a number of these actors, they don't necessarily want to come back for a small bit role. It would have to be something as substantial as like Jennifer Garner, Wesley Snipes, and Daphne Keane had in Deadpool and Wolverine. Because they're really not cameos at that point, they're supporting actors for it. And so I think they would want to have that confirmation and feel comfortable that yes, they're going to be coming back as supporting actors. And I think that if you're going to hold back any names from the X-Men, I think Halle Berry is a really good name to hold back for a second reveal, because people have noticed that she's missing. But when her name is revealed, people are going to get really excited about it. Now, the last three, I took some based off of rumors, but I went in a few different directions here. So the first one is Jeffrey Wright as Uatu the Watcher, mainly because this makes perfect sense for Uatu to show up in live action. Because the multiverse is ending. His job is to watch the multiverse and watch everything that's happening and not interfere. Now, we know that he very much interferes a lot of the time, but I think it's the right time and kind of the right setting to bring forward such a cosmic being as a Watcher. And it doesn't make sense to not do Uatu. If you're going to do a Watcher in the MCU, it has to be Uatu. And if you're going to do Uatu, I don't think there's any reason to change from Jeffrey Wright for it. Plus, it falls in line with the idea of we can see a name on the back of the chair and know who they're playing. Next up, we have Tatiana Maslany as She-Hulk. I hadn't put any characters on the list who were just purely Disney Plus show characters, but I think her character would make a decent amount of sense as well, and as a character who potentially shows up connected with Mark Ruffalo's Hulk. She has tie-ins to existing characters, and Tatiana Maslany is, in my opinion, a big enough name that potentially you get that consideration of we can bring her up and there will be people excited about seeing her name on the back of a chair, and it'll be a nice surprise. And the final one is going to be, and I should look up and make sure that he's still actively acting or has any acting credits in the last year or two. I'm pretty sure he is. Yep, he is currently in Succession. But Brian Cox, I like the idea of Brian Cox back as William Stryker. And for this one, I'll talk a little bit more about it because plot-wise, I think it makes sense. It makes sense that he would be leading the charge, leading the threat from the X-Men universe that is keeping everything on edge. Whereas you eventually might have the X-Men and the Avengers, I think you will have the X-Men and the Avengers realize that they both want the same thing, which is to save both worlds. Stryker is going to be like, nope, we have to do a preemptive strike against this other world to stop them, and he will be the one from that side acting on it. Now, There's a number of characters that you can be like, well, they're missing. Most notably from this list, we don't have any of the Champions characters. So no Kate Bishop, no Kamala Khan. Those are the two big ones from that. I think at this point it makes sense to hold back on them. If I were to pick any of them, Kate Bishop, Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop, makes the most sense. But I don't think there's any need to push for that. I think you keep them focused on creating a Champions show. Then White Vision, not on the list. The Vision show is coming out. Yes, he is an Avenger, but I don't think that we're going to have Vision ready at that point in time to really join a team or join a cause. And so it doesn't make thematic and story sense. Plus, there's this whole kind of Wanda and her family offshoot that we have going on right now. So I don't want to break that up or confuse it or make that worse because of the fact that Vision is tossed in Doomsday. Because right now that is some of the best stuff with WandaVision. I really enjoyed Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and then Agatha all along. Like that whole arc that we've kind of seen to this point. I get why people say it's a little bit weird what happens in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but I really like that arc. And then the final one is Tom Holland that I don't have on the list. And I think the reason for no Tom Holland on the list is pretty simple. We're going to have a Spider-Man 4 that takes place during the events of Doomsday. If you have a Spider-Man 4 that takes place during the events of Doomsday, you could introduce, if you want, like a Ghost Spider or Miles Morales from another universe to the main timeline. You could have them team up and kind of create their own team to deal with some threat, such as Chameleon, who's rumored to be the villain. And you get a multiversal thing, but it's not multiversal about stopping the incursions. We already know that storyline from Doomsday. Instead, you get this multiversal characters across things, and all of them will end up on the same world or in the same part of Battle World to continue into Secret Wars. So I don't think we're going to see Tom Holland in this. I do think we're going to see Tom Holland's Spider-Man in Secret Wars, along with probably Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man as well there. So there's my list of 10. Just a quick recap of those 10. We have Benedict Cumberbatch, who I think will be back as Doctor Strange, Charlize Theron as Clea, Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, Mark Ruffalo as Hulk, Denai Guerrera as Okoye, Halle Berry as Storm, Famke Janssen as Jean Grey, Jeffrey Wright as Uatu the Watcher, Tatiana Maslany as She-Hulk, and Brian Cox as William Stryker. Who do you want to see most, either from my list or from people who weren't on any list, be part of Avengers Doomsday? Let me know that down in the comment section below. And if you enjoy this content, please give the video a thumbs up. You can also check out our full conversation on this topic, on the chairs and everything, over on the 10 Minute Marvel podcast. You can find the podcast here on YouTube. Click onto the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate everybody who has and who's checking out these videos. And then click on the podcast tab. Or you can search for 10 Minute Marvel wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcast from. But with that, we'll see you next time.